Good morning. Welcome to Viewpoint, your program with personalities, politicians, and perspectives. Each Wednesday morning, 0815 to 0900 hours, 96.3 on your FM dial. The co-host, of course, is the lovely and delightful Judith K. Busby, who once in a while will let her say a word or two. And
Not too often, though. She gets
not too often. Well, after all, you haven't owned half the show yet.
Yeah.
The program always starts with a kudo. But before I come up with my kudo this morning, I have to kind of preface it with a story. Mrs. Busby will recall that I lived at one point in time in my nomad life next to a very brilliant lawyer. And he and I used to sit in the backyard once in a while and wax philosophical over a cigar and maybe a martini. And I really enjoyed talking with him. He was a brilliant man. In the FBI during the Second War, never said one word about that, ever. But anyway, he had some quirky ideas. And once in a while, he said, after we were talking about an individual or an incident, I cannot remember which, but an event. And Hardy said, well, he says, long ago I've come to the lamentable conclusion. These are his exact words, verbatim. Long ago I came to the lamentable conclusion that by and large people are just no damn good. Well,
I love that quote.
That's 35, 40 years ago. I remember that. In any event, he was a brilliant man and a very nice man. So I want to tell a story today to tell that Mr. Trapp was wrong about that. There are some very, very nice people out there, among them being Dr. Thomas Ogletree, a mighty good oral surgeon who works out of Bloomington, Illinois. And Dr. Ogletree did something very nice for this old man the other day. We got to talking before he stuck his nimble fingers in my mouth and I couldn't reply. And he had seen my hat on which I have some World War II insignia. He asked me a few questions about that. And in any event, we went about his work, and soon I was minus an old friend who was going to cause me some trouble down the road. And his nurse came to me with the bill, and it was marked paid. And my eyes kind of opened up, and she says, doctor wants to do that for World War II veterans. Well, I'm telling you, Judy and Tom, and both of you listeners out there, this old man's eyes got very misty. What a nice thing for him to have done.
Yes, it was.
And it was not an insignificant, you might know it, an oral surgeon, it was not an insignificant number. So I want to give you a thought about how to repay people who do nice things like that. I'm making a nice contribution to the Wounded Warriors Association in Dr. Ogletree's name. And for those of you who have nice things done for you and to you and don't know what to do, pick your favorite charity, and I might suggest Wounded Warriors. Pick your favorite charity and make a contribution to that charity in whomever you want to honor in their name, and then tell them about it, and they're going to feel better. But I just was stunned when that nurse came over to me and handed me a paid bill and explained the doctor wanted to do that for a World War II veteran. The doctor himself didn't consider him a veteran. He was wrong about that. He is wrong about that. He was in the Navy during peacetime, and he wore the naval uniform. It didn't make any difference. He's still a veteran.
That's right.
Thank you, Tom, very, very much. Judith K., we have a guest who will be here shortly.
Well, we have and we haven't. He is not among us.
I think he stopped at Glendale Tap.
Well, he's on his way from Memorial in the big city, and he called and he said he was lost. So he's currently still on his way, and I hope he doesn't find himself in a ditch between here and Lincoln.
I'd like to announce the number up here. People may have a comment or two. One of you listeners out there, one of the two of you at least, 648-5510. Our guest will be here, and don't hesitate to call him if you have any questions and or comments. He's associated with our great hospital, and how lucky we are, Judith K., to have Memorial Hospital here so close to us. We are incredibly lucky to have that facility here. If you are halfway between Pontiac and Livingston County somewhere and have to go 50 miles for a hospital,
Yeah.
that's another story. And they're all very dedicated. Guys, really nice. From the minute you walk in there, somebody's going to greet you with a warm greeting and see if they can help you. It's a wonderful facility. It really is.
You know, speaking of medical facilities, long ago and far away in my misspent youth, you know how it is when you're young, and Buzz was being transferred with his company from place to place. That was the way you could advance yourself back then. And we ended up at one point in Rochester, Minnesota.
Oh, boy.
And I had a couple very little kids. And in order to have a doctor's appointment, you didn't just go to the local doctor's office, you went to the Mayo Clinic. And that's pretty big time stuff. I'm telling you, that's a big outfit.
Yes, I always felt that I had something that required that kind of care. I'd hightail it there.
Oh, well, they can address anything you can think of, really. They're they're world renowned. You know.
Say, by the way, my mind's wandering around here, as it usually does.
Catch it if it goes by, Jim.
It does that. Stomp on it as it goes by. I just happened to see my note here, Dr. Ogletree. Another charity I'd like to suggest, folks, and you see it on TV, the Shriners Hospital.
Oh, yes.
They do a tremendous amount of good work, tremendous amount of work for families. No questions asked. If the child needs help, the child gets help. So I might suggest as another charity for you to consider if you're thinking in terms of making a charitable contribution. I've kind of gotten stuck on Wounded Warriors because I do not know what they're going through. Obviously, I do not. But that's another strata of care. And until you walk those moccasins, I don't think anybody could understand what, particularly those who may have been able to bypass the physical wounding and have a mental problem, PTSD as they call it. In the old days, they called it shell shock. That goes back to World War I. And we had a Spanish-American veteran run around the streets delivering a Lincoln Courier, old John Wiley by name, and he was a Spanish man. He was shell-shocked during the Spanish-American War.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. And of course, all the little boys, bad as we were, we'd make fun of John, which is a terrible thing to do. My mother would have yanked my ears off if she'd caught me at it.
When I was a kid, we lived in Minneapolis, and I had a friend named Molly. And Molly was actually born in Canada, but their family had found their way to Minneapolis, and there she was. And when she was born, she had a congenital hip problem, and she went to the Shriners Hospital, and Molly always called it the Shiners. She went to the Shiners, and they helped her so that she was at least ambulatory.
And another
because there's a big one up there.
Another charity in that vernacular, and another charity right here in Lincoln County, is what we used to call them. My goodness, they can't use this term anymore. Elks Crippled Children's.
Oh, yeah, that would not.
That's a term you can't use anymore.
That wouldn't be
in any
acceptable.
event, that goes back years. My father was on that committee, for heaven's sakes. And Irma Potter was a county nurse. We didn't have the Logan County Health Association or anything like that.
But you had Irma Potter.
Oh my goodness, Irma Potter was a one woman whirlwind, and she was in charge of that. When youngsters, I happened to be chairman of that committee, and she'd call me and say, "Bill, Mary Lou needs so and so," and I'd say, "Mrs. Potter, if you think the child needs it, you just go ahead and get it. Don't worry about it. You don't have to ask permission to do this. You just do what you want to do. We'll pay for the bill." But anyway, Elks Crippled Children. Now, that was the exact name of it. And think of that, and here we are in 2021. Dassett used that name, crippled.
Yeah, right. Well, there are any number of words that are passé. You know, things you used to say that.
Well, those are the days, Judith K. You're
polite.
too young. Jim, they used to sell what they called sunshine bonds, and those were chances for a car. Each year, an automobile dealer here in the county would make a special deal for the Elks, and they would buy a car, and they would raffle it off at the last night of the festival. And those were known as sunshine bonds, and they raised a lot of money for the impacted kids. I couldn't even think of another word to go with.
Don't you hate that when that happens?
Yeah, I went blank again.
Here you are mid-sentence and the word just flies away.
But those were different times. And fortunately, though, the Elks Crippled Children Foundation still exists and still renders its services. We have a orthopedic gentleman I don't know where he comes from now. They used to come from Peoria, Springfield, Bloomington, specialists, and they take care of these youngsters at our local hospital. And it's a warming thing to see a kid come in as an early patient and walk out later, many months or maybe 2 or 3 or 4 years later, a whole person. So think of those things, folks, when you think about charity. Those are nice things to, particularly if the charity is local. Oh, by the way, speaking of local calls and so forth, I have a friend out there. I don't know his or her name, but I know they care for me a lot.
Oh, there's your...
Yeah, they care for me a lot, but they call me at least once a week to tell me about my car warranty.
Oh,
so I have a friend.
Yes,
I have a friend for life out there.
I know.
For those of you who may be a little lonely, just get your name out there. They'll call you. The name of that was Elks Children's Care.
That's what it is
Mr.
now.
Ash, thank you for straightening me out on that.
They cleaned it up.
I knew we
so
kept him around here for some reason other than switching dials. Did you want to take a commercial break?
He's here.
The gentleman's right here right now. Well, as he comes in, we'll take a commercial break. Thank you very much. Right back live in the studios here, WLCN 96.3. Your program, of course, is Viewpoint, appearing each Wednesday morning, 08:15 to 0900 hours. Our guest arrived. He just dropped in by helicopter, and if you hear the rotor hovering above the station, he's waiting for him, taking back wherever he's going. So, why don't we introduce our guest and get serious about this?
Yeah, poor Jonathan has been wandering the highways and byways out here. Jonathan Ponser is with Memorial Behavioral Health, and we're going to be talking about the effects of the virus on people. And if you have any questions that you want to ask him, feel free to give us a call. And I know Jonathan would be happy to answer them. Jonathan, behavioral health, does that put you in cahoots with a lot of people who are having a heck of a time dealing emotionally with this virus?
My wife wants to talk to you. She wants to talk to you about me.
Yes, it does.
I think we all know people on all stages of the spectrum. You know,
Sure.
I know some who are really frightened by this.
Yes.
And I know some who think, tomorrow's another day.
Right.
You know, what are you seeing? What's happening? And how can people help themselves if they're on that end of the spectrum?
Sure. So, I mean, what we're seeing is definitely an increase in symptoms of depression and anxiety, and I think that makes sense. So if you think about just stress in general, because I know people talk about stress a lot, and usually when you talk about stress, it's more in a negative sort of way, but that isn't necessarily a bad thing, having stress. It's when we have too much stress that becomes an issue, right?
You're right.
Well, and one of the problems that came up with COVID is that the things that most people do to help themselves cope and deal with the everyday stressors, you can't do a lot of those things, right? So maybe socializing or going, maybe you go bowling, or you go do things. Usually it's around other people, right? You meet socially, you do those sorts of things. And right now, so we have an increase of overall stressors, where at the same time, the availability of coping strategies that we can use are decreasing. And so that's kind of where it's coming in, where there's more people struggling with depression and anxiety in particular.
Jonathan,
well, there's nothing like one situation fits all at all.
Sure.
But what's your general approach to people? You're talking about stress isn't always bad. Of course it's not. If it weren't for stress, etc., why would you get out of bed in the morning, for crying out loud?
Exactly.
But now that you're out of bed,
right,
you have to deal with the day.
Yep.
So do you have any hard and fast rules about the kinds of things you say to people?
Well, I mean, I think that one of the things with any kind of a change, I mean, we all like routines, right? And that tends to be a calming effect. So trying to help people find a specific routine that they can use, that they can have, even though, yes, it's not going to be your normal routine, right? Things are clearly different. But having some sort of a routine that you can be following, that can kind of give that feeling of things being a little bit more normal, and that, okay, I'm going to get through this because I know that I'm going to wake up and I'm going to have my breakfast, I'm going to go for a run, I don't know. Having some sort of a regular schedule, though, so that you know what to expect, even though you won't know what to expect with a lot of other things. At least having control over that particular routine can feel a little bit better.
Is control the bottom word here? Is that what we're missing? Is that what we're lacking?
Well, I mean, I think that's definitely a piece of it, yeah. I mean, when we feel like we have no control over something, then we start to feel overwhelmed. We start to feel a little bit more panicky, right?
I guess I'm coping well because I never had any control over anything. So it's just another day.
There you go. It's just another day.
May I ask you,
Sure.
You and your fellow professionals in your field,
Yeah.
are you seeing, I want to use the word many, or are you seeing any, I'll use that word instead of many,
Sure.
people who's have mental concerns directly related to this COVID problem?
Oh, for sure.
You're shaking your head
yeah.
very
Yes, I
firmly.
mean, because there's a number of people that they're just very anxious about it, right? Because of their own health, for example. So one of the things that we have is the emotional support line, and there's been a number of people that have called into that, and they have a lot of things that would make them more susceptible to getting a more severe case of COVID, right? And so they're really worried, because, hey, my doctor says if I get this, it's over, right? So understandably, a lot more anxiety.
Well, many of us, sir, are following the suggested guidelines. We're sheltering in place, as the saying goes.
Sure.
Is it a problem if my wife comes around the corner and says, "Oh, you again?"
Well, I mean, not necessarily. I mean, I think that can make sense, right? I mean, once you're there with the same people for a certain amount of time, there can be an increased amount of stress just around that, because we don't get to have that separation that I think we all need a little bit of it every once in a while, and then we can have something else to talk about with the other person and that sort of thing, right?
Well, we all have to follow, at least I think we all have to follow suggested guidelines. We're all in this thing together.
Yes.
And if you don't do your part, I might just well not worry about doing my part, because it's a cause and effect relationship.
It is.
Now, I want to say this about the place where we live. We happen to live at the Christian Village.
Okay.
Very, very, very impressed by the way they're handling this.
That's really good.
They're doing a wonderful job. And we got a bunch of people running around there looking up the trees, but
well,
but
yeah.
seriously, I don't mean to lie to this. This is a serious problem world over. And people, particularly older people, they get a little squirrely.
Sure.
And do you notice that?
In myself, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm using my own self as an example. Thank goodness for reading, because with my friend Mrs. Busby giving me other people passing books, I pass a lot of time that way. Some people, unfortunately, their eyes won't allow that.
Right.
And they have to find alternative ways to try to keep busy. Mm-hmm. And is this where kind of you step in with your advice and guidance and so forth?
Sure. I mean, those would definitely be some situations where we could talk with that individual and try and provide some additional support. I mean, specific to elderly, there's a program called Senior Life Solutions over at ALMH, and that's specific to those 65 and older. It's a group format where people are able to, so you get to be around some other people, which sometimes that in and of itself kind of helps out, but also get to learn some other ways of approaching, or maybe sometimes just another way of thinking about the situation that you're in. Because a lot of times, just kind of finding that other lens to look at things makes everything seem different, you know.
My grandson is in the hospital with the coronavirus. Now that's up close and personal.
Yeah.
Now that's not on the news.
Right.
You know, that's my family.
Yes.
And it puts things in a bit of a different light, you know?
Yes.
I'm sure you've run across all kinds of people who tell you that same thing, that their grandson or their brother or their daughter are in the hospital with it.
Yeah.
What does that do to your psyche?
So, I mean, and I think that, once again, it always has to do with kind of how resilient you are personally, and kinds of the resources that you have at hand to be able to cope and deal with that. So if I'm someone that, say I don't live in a community where we're all kind of together and I can kind of lean on someone else and that sort of thing, then that makes it a little bit more of a challenge if I'm just by myself, right? Because all I've got are myself and my own thoughts, and so that kind of gets to you after a while, because your internal dialogue might not always lead to the more positive side.
But we're discouraged from being in a group. So how do you reconcile that?
So, I mean, I think that still having phone calls, I definitely encourage people, if they have the ability, to try and do video calls, that sort of thing. And then, you know, when the weather was nicer, I mean, possibly being outside and you know, still distancing a little bit, but at least you kind of get to be around and chat a little bit, maybe do some activities that way.
That should, in and of itself, should be a help, I should think, to people. Bill was talking about where he lives, and I know that they have coffee parties for the people. The men have 2 days, but the men have it 2 days a week, and the ladies have it 2 days a week.
And then the third day, we always try to get together.
Oh, there's always that.
Just wanted to point that out.
Hey, you know.
Anyway, now come spring, you see, they can go back to that because you can have your social distancing. There's another new term for it.
I'd like to point out that our guest this morning, this small studio here at WLCN, he entered wearing his mask. And I marked that because he's observing what he ought to observe. We three are pretty used to one another, and we're not, none of us are out circulating, so to speak. So
but we are mask wearers.
So we don't see people. So we don't think about it. I have it in the car.
Sure.
And so does Judith. We're very careful about wearing them. But I want to call to attention to the fact that Mr. Ponzer is so serious about this, because that's what he does.
Right.
By the way, we didn't mention that he's appearing under the auspices of our wonderful hospital, the Abraham Lincoln Memorial Hospital.
Yes, we do.
Want to tell us a little bit about that and how that works in with your profession, sir?
So how let me make sure that I understand the question. So kind of.
That's my fault, not yours.
So how what I do works with Abraham Lincoln?
Yes.
Okay. So what I mean, for me, I don't personally work there at ALMH, but we do have programs within Memorial Behavioral Health.
I was misinformed about that.
Right. So like the Senior Life Solutions, that's there at the ALMH, and then we also provide mental health crisis services there in the emergency room. So if someone comes in and they're in crisis, there's people from our teams that are there to provide immediate help if needed as well.
Well, this is a serious matter for people who are worried, not disturbed, but are concerned mentally about these. What does a person? Let's say that I'm just kind of pretty fraught with worry and danger. Not danger, but I'm concerned, and it's bothering me mentally. Where would I start to get assistance on that?
So, I mean, there's a couple of different places that you can go. I mean, one would be, if the only thing you can do is over the phone, like I said, there's the emotional support line, and so that's at 588 or area code 217-588-5509. And that runs Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. And we have a clinician, a master's level clinician that's there on that line to be able to help people whenever they call during those hours, and can provide some support. I mean, and we've had a number of people that have taken us up on that, and there's been some people that have found it so helpful that they seem to call about every day or every other day, just to kind of get that additional support. And I mean, there's some people that really can't get it any other way, and so that's their
If
approach.
somebody is really upset and can't recall anything but 911, would 911 direct them? Do they know how to do that?
Not necessarily. They not necessarily. I mean, there might be someone that would have some of that information on hand to be able to direct people there, but generally speaking, they're probably going to be looking more at, okay, what's the immediate emergency, and then trying to see if they need to go out there or that sort of thing. So I mean, really kind of contacting that particular support line would probably get you the support that you want a little bit faster.
Don't you think that sometimes people call that really don't need assistance with a mental health issue, but rather it's somebody that they can call and talk to? And I'm sure there are just many people in our society who are relatively cut off from the rest, and it's even worse now with this darn virus that affects everybody in one way or another. Maybe they just call you because they want to hear a human voice that responds to them.
Yes, I would agree with that. I think that there are people that call for that exact reason. And that's okay too. I mean, it doesn't have to be a crisis sort of a thing to call in.
No,
not at all.
But if you know somebody through your church or just in your neighborhood who seems to be quite alone, it might be well to give them a call once in a while just to say, hi, how are you? Or isn't that news terrible? Or isn't it icy this morning? Be very careful.
Yes.
You used a word, an important word in my judgment. You use that word alone. People who are alone face an entirely different factor than those of us who have wives and or friends or whatever. People who intermingle with one another for one good reason or another. A person, an elderly person in particular, who's alone suddenly, they have a more difficult time in making those adjustments, I would assume.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. I mean, I think especially, so I mean, I know that there's been some people that say they're really into maybe knitting, or they have some other hobby that they can do individually and in their home, and so maybe they can cope a little bit better, but it's still going to get to you to some degree, right? And that's kind of where, like you were saying, I mean, having someone to reach out to, or hopefully reach out to you and check in on you, is always of a benefit.
648-5510. I'd like to remind our listeners out there, both of you, pay attention. This is not Psychology 101 we're having here this morning. Gentleman is professionally trained to be of assistance to folks who are concerned. I use that word just kind of advisedly. Concerned would cover a lot of things.
Yeah.
And they should not... Some people, that becomes a real serious matter, and it dwells on them, and it changes their whole entire personality. Mm-hmm. And their kids start noticing it.
Yep, that's true. Yep, and those are the first people to notice, right?
Now, do you have families contact you, say, I'm worried about Grandma?
Yeah, I mean, there's some that will do that. I mean, I think that a lot of times it seems like what I hear about the most is worried about their kids, like so parents calling in worried about that, or worrying about themselves and how they're going to cope with the financial stressors that are going on in terms of, hey, I got furloughed right now, right? I can't go into work for the time being. And so it just kind of adds another layer to perhaps an already stressful life.
You know, back in the olden days, it was always accepted and expected that whatever you were going to do, whatever your decision was in whatever quarter of your life,
Sure.
you always measured it by, now how is this going to affect the others in my life? Of course, we've gotten over that pretty well now, and we've honed it down so that we're pretty much just worried about number one. You know? So we've gotten rid of that problem.
Well,
But maybe we ought to go back to that a little bit, thinking about somebody else.
oh, sure. Yeah, no,
And how this virus is affecting them, because there are people who are really being affected adversely, scared to death.
Yes.
How were we lucky enough, sir, to get somebody with your background and professional education to come in here to Lincoln, Logan County?
I mean, I guess kind of for me, it's just kind of my desire to help others, right? I mean, I think that's pretty much anyone that goes into this field. I mean, you don't go in it for any kind of fame or monetary gain, really. It's more of just something that you do because that's something that you care about and that you believe in.
Well, it's a really it's an in-depth subject. There's no question about that. I had a Psych 101 professor. I thought he was squirrely as could be.
Hey, that can happen.
And I think he may have thought the same about his students.
Sure, yeah, no doubt.
No, psychology is an in-depth, never-ending study. And what you find today is true 10 days later. That didn't apply at all. So it's an ever-changing norm, I presume.
So in terms of updates in education and strategies and that sort of thing, sure. I mean, that's something that we're always continuing education on the new things that come up and ways to approach therapy and how to support them with particular diagnoses and that sort of thing. So, you know, I mean, there's always new things that are coming up and just kind of trying to stay on top of it for sure.
You know, we all interact with so many people in a given day. Now, if Bill and I each, for instance, had an appointment with you this afternoon,
Sure.
How do you...
God forbid his day.
Yeah. How do you measure someone so you know what clues could you give us that might help us in our dealings with all the people we run into hither and yon? Because you can't, there's no Band-Aid approach. You know, what works to help Bill might not work to help me at all, you know? So you got to take Plan B.
Sure.
How do you know?
How do I know which strategy is going to work? That's
whether
what you're
you
asking?
use plan A or plan B.
Sure. Well, I think that's you just have to kind of listen, and not just what they're verbally saying, but kind of the nonverbal cues, right? And those are some of the things that can let you know, hey, this person seems like they're someone that is maybe more into activities. This is someone that likes more thinking or cognitive strategies, so I'm going to go maybe that route. So it's kind of noticing the kinds of things that they're already naturally interested in and trying to build on those strengths that they already have, and hopefully in that process helping them to grow any areas that they're not as strong in. So
In other
it's
words,
kind of looking at the strengths.
We should all use our ears at least twice as much as we use our mouths, right?
Oh, for sure. I mean, yes, there's a lot of families I've had that kind of conversation with.
Sure.
Yes.
Doctor, we have some great professionals over at the Logan County Health Department, John. Does your calling cause you to interact with them as well as our hospital?
So the health department, I don't.
I was just curious to know if
Yeah, I don't work with them as so directly.
Got a great group of people over there doing a fine job.
I'm sure they refer people to you.
Yeah, I mean, if there's someone that is having some sort of mental health problem, for sure. I mean, yeah, right now, so in Lincoln, where we are, we're inside the MPS Lincoln. We're in the basement there is where the behavioral health clinic is there. So which is something that I think is kind of nice, because I know that there can be kind of a stigma around mental health and getting support. So, I like that people can go in there, and for what anyone else would know, hey, I'm here to see my doctor, right? And then you're seeing a mental health professional, and you're able to get that help that you need without having any of that stigma that you might be concerned about. So
now, will you see clients and or patients on an ongoing basis, or a series of appointments to help them work them through a problem that seems to be working on them?
Oh, yeah.
That's your modus operandi.
Yes. Yep.
So one call isn't going to do it necessarily.
Oh, no. There's
or rarely.
Rarely. If that's going to do it, then more than likely it was probably something where the person already kind of knew what they needed to do, and they just needed someone to give them that reassurance that, yeah, I'm on the right path and doing the right thing. Yeah, so...
Well, that's not an all bad reason to see you.
Oh, no. I mean, it's not. I mean, like, I'd rather that than someone worry themselves so much that it becomes something bigger, right? Mm-hmm. So for sure. I mean, like, yeah.
This may be your last chance to tell Mr. Ponzer here. We just appreciate your taking your time and your navigating to get here, sir. Particularly with this COVID thing being so big in the entire world, not just here in Logan County. Mm-hmm. I know that you can't tell them when they're going to get their shots, but...
oh, no, that's outside of my...
648-5510. This will be your last opportunity to ask a question of our guest this morning, who's been very kind to give of his time. Where do you live, sir?
So I actually live down towards Springfield, so in Chatham. So I live down there, and then I manage some people here in Lincoln, and then some in Jacksonville, and then some in Springfield.
Well, you must have seen my 3 grandchildren down there in Chatham. They're the most handsome kids down there, so you'd recognize them anywhere.
Right? Yeah, Yep. I know who that is. Right? That's right.
By the way, that's a pretty nice little community.
It is. Yeah. No, I've enjoyed.
COVID has kept me out of there because
for obvious reasons.
And I'd love to see them, but I just feel, why take the chance?
Exactly.
Well, now, for a while they were saying that kids weren't immune, but it wasn't affecting them to the same degree that it was adults. Is that still operational?
As far as I know, that seems to be the case. I mean, it's not, I still know that there's a number of kids that have gotten it, but... And kind of depending upon underlying issues and that sort of thing, it could impact them more or less.
John Ponzer, we appreciate very much your being with us this morning. As I've said, almost ad nausea, but we really do. this little place sits up here high on the hill on County Road 2250. Sometimes people know exactly where it is, and other but it's kind of remote. So we appreciate your making the extra effort to be here, sir. Thank you very much.
Problem.
And thank Abraham Lincoln Memorial Hospital for kind of authoring you, so to speak.
Sure.